So I guess 2020 will go down in the annals of history because of this crazy pandemic, which is affecting us right here today, as you can see. But for all of us, and I think for many, many more people, it'll also go down as a very important memory of the passing of a legend who was my mum. And I think there'll be plenty of people that look back in her life with a great deal of care and joy at how they were impacted by her, and a little bit more of that later, I guess. But it's just testimony again for the fact that you guys are all here too to celebrate that with us. So I thought I'd just spend a few wee moments reminiscing about her life, not so much looking at her life chronologically, but remembering the person that she was. And so I've sort of like 4 general kind of ideas that I want to sort of share with you and hopefully provoke your memories as well. First of all, I thought I would sort of say what I believe at her heart, that she was intensely loving and caring. That was fundamentally who she was, and not only to her family, although we felt that really strongly, but to everybody that she met. There was a desire to care for and look after people. And that probably was why she chose to be a nurse, and she trained in Londonderry to be a nurse and ended up in Scotland for a time in the community doing that, and worked largely then as a midwife up at Nagelvin Hospital and Anderson House. That was the little annex. I think it still exists, I'm not absolutely sure, but not as a maternity unit. But I guess that what she brought to folks that were going through suffering or pain or just giving birth to a child, that was something that was just right at the heart of who she was, being able to be there with somebody, encouraging them, helping them at the moment of their greatest need. And once Ian came along, then my mum gave her career up for a time and then stayed at home with us crazy ones, and there was 4 of us crazy ones. But what I would say, I always felt this, and she was always there for you. Now, physically, she was there in the morning before we went out. She was there when we came home. She was there with her homework. She was there, talking to us and encouraging us, watching TV together. She just was there, and I really appreciate that I had her. I know we live in a society where it's kind of the kids have their own keys and they let themselves in, and even our boys do that. So, but it was lovely to know that my mum was there for us. And I often think of little pictures that kind of demonstrate that for me, and I think of the set of shoes on a Saturday evening, all lined out, all nicely polished, for me to go and play football with on the way to school or to church. No, that wasn't allowed, and scuff them up a little bit. But also the gathering of laundry. She had a laundry magnet, I think, so we didn't have to worry about our clothes. We just kind of fired them on the floor. Adrian did anyway, for sure. And my mum just kind of scooped everything up. The beds were made when we came home. We didn't have to do a hand's turn, as it turns out. I'm not sure that was the best example of parenting, but it still was loving and caring for us, and I just want to honour her for that, and she definitely was. And something that Karen shared, it's another little memory of that. If you came to her with a sore finger or a sore toe or something you hurt, she would put it in the warm box. She would literally gather it inside her hand like that. Now, I don't know if she had the gift of healing, but it certainly brought a lot of comfort to us. My gym instructor just says, go and get some hurdy cream now, if you're which means just suck it up, really, But she was there for us, and I think whilst we have general sort of memories of her love and care, each one of us children have a unique sense of that. And I'm sure if Adrian or Karen were here, they'd share something slightly different. But for me, my greatest memories is the walks that I took with Mum. When we were on holiday in Castle Rock, which seemed like every year, it probably was every year, Mum and I used to walk the dunes, and apparently when everybody changed into their swimsuits, they all dropped money, apparently. So therefore, we went on a money hunt, and over the dunes we were constantly, I still do that, as my kids would tell me, even to this day, I'll pick up the penny that I find, because that was sort of bred into me. But I remember also taking the dog for a walk with my mum down to see my dad's mum and dad, who lived near us, walking down with them. I used to absolutely love that. That is my most treasured memories. I used to sit and say nothing in my granny and granda's house, but I just loved being with my mum and having that time. So the other wee thing about, I don't know if this is sort of in the same category, but she had her own distinct language, which I don't know what that was about. And again, if you're talking about gifting, maybe it's an early manifestation of the speaking in tongues, I'm not sure. But there's a couple of phrases I'm sure you remember. Elakumishi, not sure what that meant, okay. Now, I'm looking at Doreen Lynn, maybe it's a Houston thing. Shumirigoya, was that the other one? Yeah, okay. And we used to actually realise that if we looked at her in a certain way, we knew that she would come out with that phrase. I don't know what that was about, but it just showed her unique personality. The second area I want to sort of celebrate with is that she used to bring the crack. She absolutely would light up any social situation and take it on herself to be the entertainer. And we have a wee sort of Houston's chats, the cousins together. I don't participate much in it, but all the memories that came through were all of Annie up at 80 Moore near Strabane, just bringing the crack, just absolutely, being the centre of entertainment there. She was indeed the life and soul of such situations. I think in the Porter family too, I'm looking at Iris, probably she did the very same as well. And I think I heard a wee comment from Leslie about that Sandra felt very much that it was Annie that helped her kind of migrate into the Porter family. It was because of Annie's personality. She had the gift of the gab. It is slightly ironic, unfortunately, because these last months she hasn't uttered too many words at all and did a lot of signing to my dad when they were talking to each other. But she could talk. I remember I used to phone home from university on one of those payphone things you had to walk to, put in my money. My dad would say, "Oh, hello, son, I'll just hand you over to my mum." And that was that. I didn't have to say a single thing after that. I just listened and listened until my money ran out because she could talk. And you know what? It was really good. Sitting somewhere away from home, it was actually very comforting, I have to say. She also was a bit of a preacher. You probably knew that. But there was a particular version of that again, she used to go to a wee, like a gospel hall. I think it was in somebody's house when she was younger, up near Strabane. And she used to take off the preacher. Now, hopefully, Ollie, this isn't like your style, okay? But this was what she would recount time and time again. And it was, "Beloved unsaved in this meeting today, where will you spend eternity? Ah, friend, I used to go to the ball, but after the ball, friend, what then? What then?" Now, I don't know how that all ended or whether there's a great response to that, but she would recount that many times. She was also into matchmaking, and there's many young people that came through the ranks of Child Evangelism Fellowship that she worked with and the youth in the church that were part of Annie's matchmaking schemes. Now, I don't know how many were successful. I'm sure there's a few out there, but there's a few embarrassing ones for Karen, at least, I would say. More than a few, maybe? Yeah, okay, let's move on. But, just to say that, again, our house, my memory is our house was always buzzing. There was adults that came, there was my friends, and my mum would entertain them. Sometimes I would go off upstairs and the friends would still be entertained by my mum. The third thing I'd bring is that she really found engaging with kids was her forte. And that began her CEF journey when she decided to work with Child Evangelism Fellowship. And it was her vision when she looked out at the children playing across the street on a Sunday and decided, why would they not be in a Sunday school somewhere? And realising there's a lot of kids that never had that opportunity. And so it was born in her to do something about that, and they started a club together in her home, and then that expanded. They ended up teaching 4 clubs, kids clubs together in Londonderry and just outside Londonderry, and then that caused them then to step in to actually become workers with Child Evangelism himself. First in the Northwest here, but then over in the Isle of Man, and latterly back here for a little spell at the end of their working life. She really excelled in that in the phone ministry. There was a way that children could phone and leave a message, and I remember being in bed at midnight and hearing that beep, beep of all the answering phone messages, and I thought, would you please go to sleep, would you? But she was so full of that, and then writing letters to those kids. And there was a couple of letters we read from kids in the Isle of Man, actually, writing back to my mum to show their experience of how she had impacted them in clubs and things like that. So that was something that she really relished so much. There's so many stories, actually, of people whose lives were changed from meeting her and my dad. Like you mentioned it. We couldn't number, but it does seem like everybody in the Isle of Man at some stage was impacted by my mum and my dad. And she was particularly keen on the marginalised, the scallywags. I remember one child, I was a dorm leader at one of the camps, and this wee kid really rubbed me up the wrong way. He was really full of himself. He was a gorgeous looking fella, and he knew it. I just was at my end of my toes, so cheeky and so forth. But my mum absolutely adored him and treated him like royalty, and I just couldn't get that. But because she saw in him something of the mischievous that was in her, and she saw somebody that was in the margins that she cared and loved for. The last thing I'll just end with this is that, as we said, as Ollie had said earlier, her love for God and for Jesus was the actual thing that really typified her desire and brought her gifts to bear. She came to faith at a Billy Graham crusade. I think it was one of these, it wasn't live, but televised through, I think that was right, in the late 1950s. And continued to live for God and seek out his way, and in many ways in the church and in ministry as well. And my memory of my mum and dad will always be of prayers and Bible study in the morning. And often it was with Annie eating toast, because Dad had to get up and make the toast and the tea and then bring it back, and that was time for prayer and Bible study. And they had a prayer regime that they'd pray for certain people on certain days, so I knew that I was always being prayed for during every single week. And she was a natural communicator of her faith. Give her an option, especially in the context of children, and she would pour out her love for Jesus, and that was infectious. And finally, I just say, and again, it's funny, the phrase has already been mentioned, she modelled a life that was well lived for God, and that will and continue to be her legacy. And as the generations unfold, and with wee Kiva now, her great-grandchild, was able to celebrate for that last month of her life, and that really brought distinctive joy into her circumstance in that last month, then I believe the generations will rise up to call her blessed.